In the early 1800s, the American frontier beckoned with the promise of a new life. John Bell, his wife Lucy and their children answered that call, leaving behind their familiar life in North Carolina for the wilds of Tennessee. They settled in Adams, a small community in the northern part of the state, drawn by the fertile land and the spirit of adventure. Life on the frontier was hard work, but the Bells persevered. They built a home, planted crops, and became part of the fabric of their new community. For a while, life was good. There was a sense of peace and tranquility that settled over the Bell family, a sense that they had truly found a place to put down roots. Little did they know that their idyllic life was about to be shattered by something sinister lurking just beyond their understanding. In today's episode, we will be looking into the chilling tale of the curse of the Bell Witch, America's most famous haunting. The Bells' homestead, a sprawling farmhouse surrounded by fields and forests, became their sanctuary. John, the patriarch, was a respected farmer and a pillar of the community. Lucy, a kind and loving woman, kept their home running smoothly. Their children, filled with the energy and optimism of youth, thrived in the open spaces of their new home. It was a time of growth and prosperity for the Bell family, a time when the future seemed full of hope and promise. They had no reason to believe that their lives were about to take a dark and terrifying turn. As the sun set each night, casting long shadows across the fields, the Bells would gather in their cozy farmhouse. The scent of Lucy's cooking filled the air, and the sound of laughter echoed through the rooms. John would often read aloud from the Bible, his deep voice filling them with a sense of comfort and security. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and the crickets chirped a lullaby to the settling day. The Bells had found happiness and contentment in their new home, unaware that something wicked this way was coming. But as time went on, a darkness began to creep into their lives. At first, it was just a subtle shift, a feeling of unease that settled over the homestead. The Bells tried to ignore these unsettling feelings, attributing them to the stresses of frontier life. They told themselves it was just their imaginations, but deep down, a seed of fear had been planted. And that seed was about to take root and grow into a nightmare that would plague their family for years to come. The first signs of the haunting were subtle, easy to dismiss as tricks of the mind or the sounds of nature. Strange noises began to emanate from the walls of the Bell home, whispers and groans that seemed to slither through the silence. Objects moved inexplicably, as if guided by unseen hands. The Bells initially dismissed these occurrences as the work of mischievous animals or the settling of the old farmhouse. But as the days turned into weeks, the incidents grew bolder, more persistent. They began to suspect that something was amiss, something that defied rational explanation. One evening as the family gathered for supper, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. They rushed in to find pots and pans scattered across the floor, as if they had been violently thrown from their shelves. The children were terrified, their eyes wide with fear. John, a practical man, tried to calm their nerves, but even he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The air grew thick with tension, the silence broken only by the sound of their own ragged breathing. They were no longer alone in their home. Something else was there, something unseen and malevolent. As the haunting intensified, the strange occurrences became more frequent and more disturbing. Footsteps echoed through the house at night, heavy and deliberate, yet no one was there. Doors slammed shut on their own, their sound sharp and menacing in the stillness. The children's toys danced across the floor, seemingly animated by an unseen force. The Bells were living in a constant state of fear, their once peaceful home transformed into a prison of terror. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by a bone-deep dread that clung to them like a shroud. They were trapped in a nightmare, and there seemed to be no escape. Whispers of the strange happenings at the Bell farm began to circulate through the community. Neighbors, initially skeptical, exchanged nervous glances, and whispered tales of strange noises and unexplained events. The once idyllic peace of Adams was shattered, replaced by an undercurrent of fear. The Bells, once a respected family, became objects of curiosity and dread. They were isolated, trapped in their own private hell, the target of an unseen entity that seemed determined to drive them to the brink of madness. The haunting had begun, and with it, a reign of terror that would leave an indelible mark on the history of the American frontier. While the entire Bell family was tormented by the unseen entity, John and his daughter Betsy seemed to bear the brunt of the witch's fury. John, once a robust and healthy man, began to experience a rapid decline in health. He suffered from agonizing cramps, his body racked with pain that seemed to have no earthly cause. His voice, once strong and booming, was reduced to a raspy whisper. The witch seemed to be draining the life out of him slowly and deliberately. His once vibrant spirit was broken, replaced by a haunted look of fear and despair. Betsy, a bright and lively young woman, was subjected to relentless physical and emotional abuse. The witch would pull her hair, scratch her and pinch her, leaving behind painful welts and bruises. She was tormented by whispers and taunts, her dreams invaded by visions of the entity that held her captive. The witch seemed to take a perverse delight in breaking Betsy's spirit, turning her from a carefree young woman into a shadow of her former self. The witch's campaign of terror against John and Betsy was relentless. The entity would often speak through Betsy, its voice a chilling rasp that sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it. It would taunt John with threats and insults, its words laced with a venomous hatred that defied explanation. The Bells were trapped in a living nightmare, their tormentor an unseen entity that seemed to possess an intimate knowledge of their deepest fears and insecurities. As the days turned into weeks, the witch's hold on John and Betsy grew stronger. The community watched in horror as the witch tightened its grip on the Bell family, its malevolent influence spreading like a dark stain across the once peaceful settlement of Adams. The haunting of the Bell family was no longer just a local legend, it was a terrifying reality that had taken root in their lives, threatening to destroy everything they held dear. As the Bell family's suffering intensified, so too did the whispers about the witch's true identity. Many in the community believed that the entity tormenting the Bells was the spirit of a woman named Kate Batts, a reclusive neighbor known for her sharp tongue and her knowledge of the occult. Kate had borne a grudge against John Bell, stemming from a business dispute that had left her feeling cheated and humiliated. She had been heard to utter curses against John and his family, vowing that they would pay for crossing her. Kate Batts was an outcast, a woman feared and reviled in equal measure. She lived alone in a dilapidated shack on the outskirts of Adams, her only companions a murder of crows that seemed to share her malevolent spirit. She was known to practice witchcraft, her home filled with strange herbs, animal bones, and other artifacts of the occult. The locals steered clear of her, their fear of her powers outweighing their curiosity. She was a dark stain on the fabric of their community, a reminder that evil could lurk in the most unexpected places. When Kate Batts died, many believed that her vengeful spirit had found a new target in the Bell family. They whispered that she had cursed them from beyond the grave, her rage and bitterness fueling the entity that tormented them. The timing of the haunting, so soon after Kate's death, seemed too coincidental to ignore. The witch's voice, a raspy whisper that sent shivers down the spine, was said to bear a striking resemblance to Kate's own sharp tongue. The evidence, circumstantial though it was enough to convince many that the Bell family was cursed. The legend of Kate Batts' curse spread like wildfire through the community, adding fuel to the fire of fear that had gripped Adams. The Bells were living proof that some sins could not be forgiven, that even death was not enough to quench the thirst for revenge. The witch's reign of terror had cast a long shadow over the community, its malevolent influence seeping into the fabric of their lives. The haunting of the Bell family was no longer just a local legend. It was a cautionary tale, a reminder that even in the wilds of the American frontier, there were some forces that were best left undisturbed. The Bell Witch haunting was not a private affair confined to the walls of the family farmhouse. As the entity grew bolder, its reign of terror spilled out into the community, ensnaring the entire town of Adams in its web of fear. Strange occurrences were reported throughout the area, unexplained noises, objects moving on their own, and fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures lurking in the periphery of vision. The once peaceful community was transformed into a hotbed of paranoia and suspicion, as neighbors turned on each other, whispering accusations and fearing for their own safety. The haunting became a public spectacle, drawing curious onlookers and self-proclaimed ghost hunters from far and wide. Word of the Bell Witch spread like wildfire, carried on the tongues of travelers, until it reached the ears of one of the most prominent figures in the nation, Andrew Jackson. Intrigued and perhaps a little skeptical, Jackson decided to see for himself whether the tales were true. He assembled a group of men and set out for Adams, eager to confront the entity that had terrorized an entire community. Jackson's arrival in Adams was met with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Some believed that the war hero and future president would be able to vanquish the evil that plagued them, while others feared that his presence would only serve to further enrage the entity. As Jackson and his men approached the Bell farm, their wagon suddenly ground to a halt, the wheels seemingly stuck fast in the mud. A voice, cold and menacing, emanated from the nearby bushes, taunting Jackson and challenging his authority. Despite his initial skepticism, Jackson was visibly shaken by the encounter. He and his men beat a hasty retreat, leaving the Bell family to their fate, famously stating he'd rather fight the entire British army than face the witch again. The haunting continued to escalate, the entity's grip on the community tightening with each passing day. People were afraid to leave their homes after dark, the shadows seeming to teem with unseen dangers. In 1820, the witch finally made good on her threat. John Bell passed away after months of declining health, and the family discovered a mysterious vial of liquid near his bed. The witch claimed responsibility, stating that she had poisoned him. At John Bell's funeral, the witch's voice was heard laughing and singing, mocking the grieving family. This event marked the climax of the haunting. The Bell Witch had cast a long shadow over Adams, transforming it from a thriving frontier community into a ghost town, haunted by the specter of an entity that seemed to defy all attempts at explanation or exorcism. The Bell Witch is not just a ghost story, but a compelling piece of American folklore that continues to captivate audiences centuries after the events supposedly took place. Whether seen as a tale of vengeance, supernatural terror, or psychological intrigue, the haunting of the Bell family stands out as one of the most well-documented paranormal events in history. Its mix of eerie voices, personal attacks, and mysterious deaths has cemented its place as a chilling mystery. Yet, like many tales of the paranormal, the truth behind the Bell Witch may never be fully known. What we do know is that it has left a lasting impression on Tennessee and has inspired generations of storytellers, investigators, and thrill-seekers. At the heart of the Bell Witch legend is an essential human question: what happens when we are confronted with the unknown? The Bell family's experience, real or imagined, reminds us of how little we may understand about the world around us. Whether it's a ghost, a trick of the mind, or something entirely different, the story continues to provoke fascination, fear, and endless speculation. This concludes today's episode of the Paranormal Report. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a thumbs up, and consider subscribing to our channel. It is due to your continued viewership and support that we are able to bring you interesting and informative videos like this. The team here at the Paranormal Report really appreciates your support.